Welcome to Growth for Good, the show about amplifying impact for nonprofits, charities, and social purpose businesses. I'm Daniel Francavilla, a marketing advisor and brand strategist and your host. On this show, I interview leaders at nonprofits and social enterprises and the organizations that support them. We discuss the wins, challenges, and best practices when it comes to communications, marketing, fundraising, and impact. Let's dive into today's episode. So welcome to Growth for Good, Rickesh. Thanks so much for being on the show. I've been wanting to get you on for a while. You were one of the first people I reached out to, so thanks for being here.
Oh, that's very kind. I've always admired you and your work and the way you approach things and your creativity. So I was really excited to have a chance to be on here and have a chat with a friend about some good
Awesome.
stuff.
Yeah,
Some
thank
good
you.
stuff.
And it was great that we actually ran into each other at the networking event the other day, the AFP one. I think it's so good to see the nonprofit sector kind of coming together in person, which is nice. But yeah, so great to be here with you, Rickesh. Today we're going to start off by kind of telling a little bit of your story and where you're at, because I know you kind of have had an amazing career in the nonprofit space. So I'd love to if you could explain where you started in the nonprofit sector and where you're at right now.
Yeah, 100%. The stories are always important to see where you came from, where you are, and where you're going. So I started as a lot of folks did, kind of fell into it. I went to school for business, and I was realizing this is probably not going to be fulfilling, rewarding for me personally. And so then I discovered this whole other space where you can, work every day trying to support and change some of these really big issues in a coordinated way. And that's where I sort of really decided this is where I want to be after working in it for a while. And so I started out in fundraising at United Way, and then I was there for a few years and leading a large fundraising campaign. And then an organization I volunteer with and love called Future Possibilities for Kids. We're looking for a new leader. And so I was able to, fortunate to be chosen to be in that role, and so to now be a community-based or the ED of a community-based organization serving children. And then in January of this year, I actually gave my notice and said, hey, I'm going to be heading out in a few months. So I gave a long notice, which is what I always wanted to do. I did something a little unusual. I didn't exactly have a next step planned. I just knew after the last couple of years, if we're being fully transparent here, I was just knew I was going to need a little bit of time to heal and recover and figure things out and reset. So where you're catching me now is I've recently launched Radiance Advisory. And what I want to do is work with social impact organizations to really align their declared values, what they say they're doing publicly and what they stand for, with how they operate internally based on truth and trust. How do you treat people? How do you operate in a way that's ethical, equitable? And it's often we know what we need to do, but we have trouble getting there. And so that's what I want to be doing for the next chapter.
Amazing. I love that. And you definitely bring a wealth of knowledge being on the inside of these organizations. So definitely excited to see kind of some of the projects you work on with that. Now, obviously being in the space requires you to be passionate about what you do, right? About whether that's a cause or an organization or a community specifically. So I'd love to know, Rickesh, what are some of those causes or initiatives that you're personally passionate about?
We do need to really find fulfillment and reward in our work and connect to what it is that we're doing. So for me, definitely one of those is community building. So it's a little bit more abstract, but it's how do we bring multiple folks together and come up with solutions together. I think that's something that I'm always passionate about, which was a fit in sort of my first role. And then also supporting working with children, because of course they are the future. And, we always want the next generation to be in a better space than the previous one. And so when we can ensure that every child has an opportunity to really understand themselves and see the role they play in the world and build that confidence, that's something that I'm also very, very passionate about, especially having now 3 children of my own. I really see that that's something I'm passionate about. Now I've sort of, my next chapter is more about being passionate about reducing hypocrisy in the social impact space. And as I said, aligning behaviors and values. Like I see that that often hinders us doing the good work. We don't invest properly in ourselves, in our infrastructure, in people, and do things in a way that's going to really help us achieve those missions. And so that's sort of the new thing that I'm excited and passionate about.
That's great. And yeah, it's definitely a transformation, but those interests and those passions that you have kind of can carry through no matter what role you're in, right? Whether you're volunteering, whether it's a job, or whether it's your own business as you're launching as well. So we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about the world of online, marketing, social media, and you're very active on social, which is great. I always love to see that. You're definitely a great example for kind of leaders in the sector to kind of put themselves out there. What are some things that either leaders or organizations can do to kind of stand out in a really crowded online world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know that you've always been someone who's an advocate for digital, and this is before it's people are like, oh wow, we're already too late. So a lot of folks have been have been screaming off the rooftops for a while that like embrace digital, and often we do find that there is a bit of a lag in folks embracing this stuff. So I was fortunate that we actually got a grant to work with Claire Levy, who is a great person, and many years ago. She told me, so there's two elements. There's the organizational, a reputation and online presence, and then there's the individual person. And she told me something like, you're one of the main faces of the organization. And so from your personal space, you need to be out there talking about this stuff. And so the organization, of course, should. That's pretty, clear. But that's something that's important for you to do. So figure out what it is you need to do, put your humility aside. And we're not talking about going out there bragging and being, arrogant necessarily. We're talking about advocating for the issues that impact the organization you're working within. And so that happens perhaps in more public spaces like social media, but it also happens behind the scenes when you're reaching out to government officials and you're pushing in through multiple channels to push for broader change. Like to me, every social impact organization should be spending 10 to 20% of their time and resources on something larger than what's happening within their own walls. And part of that is how the leaders of the organization show up publicly to advocate for things. So like Food Share Toronto is a great example of that. They very much stand out because even recently they were publicly vocal about supporting CUPE workers during the labor action, because like this is about paying people equitably, and it's about workers' rights. And so they took a stand on something that isn't directly related, clearly necessarily to what they're doing. But, Paul Taylor as himself and the organization, they were able to stand out in that way. And they're not doing it for show. They mean it, but it does attract attention. So when you're talking about a crowded space, so many organizations are silent when it comes to things that are related to these public things that are happening. They just kind of keep saying the same message about their own work, which is also necessary. But I think you have to break out of your own walls.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of repetition that's required, of course. And, as you know, on social, not everyone sees every piece of content that goes out there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, at the same time, it's important. You mentioned Paul Taylor as an example. And I think this leads to my next question. He's someone who works, obviously he maintains his own personal brand and what he does in addition to the organization that he represents as a leader. So I would love to know, Rickesh, personally, what role you think your personal brand or your network at least has played in the success, as a leader in an organization.
I think for me, I was always like, I'm just gonna do this quietly and just sort of, not make a big stink about my particular role in it. And I think a lot of folks will need to sort of wrestle with that. And it's like, I don't want to be out there saying it's all me, because 100% it was a team. Always the team gets full credit for anything great that happened. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that in this. And so once I started to recognize that this is actually going to help achieve our organizational goals, and I think you have to be mindful of, does your personal brand overtake your organization's brand? Are you using your organizational brand as a platform to elevate yourself beyond that brand? And I think that's where I start to kind of worry. But I think if you can do it in parallel and say, the more I expand my personal reputation out there and bring other people into the fold to trust me, I then take that spill off sort of and leverage that in a way to sort of bring trust to the organization. And I would say at Future Possibilities for Kids, when I first started, I said, I was new to being an ED, and I said, I don't know exactly all about the programmatic side yet. I'm going to learn. But what I can do is, how do we get people hyped up and excited about the work of the organization and want to be involved, whether that's volunteering, donating, providing, guidance, whatever that happens to be. So to me, I saw that parallel happen, that the more I was out there doing it in a way that was comfortable for me, it spilled off and did a lot for FBK's brand as well. So the two kind of went hand in hand. And I will say there was a really interesting question someone asked me recently, though, that's very relevant to this. And they said, what happens when you leave the organization? You've built up, if people associate you with the brand and then you leave, can the new leader take that over? Or is there some of that's still there? And I thought I had to think about that. And I said, I wouldn't have done my job if FBK's brand didn't, grow significantly in the process. And I would say that we did build something that was sustaining and lasting and will last way beyond me, because I just wanted to fade off into the sunset. It's not about me anymore, right? And so I think that was something I did notice, that our presence, our reputation will be a lasting impact.
That's incredible that you brought up that comment, because I was actually going to mention that, a lot of times I do workshops on personal branding, or I speak with leaders of organizations. And that is often one of the things I mention, is that your personal brand follows you no matter which organization you're part of, and the values that you've kind of kept and put out into the world, those do translate across. So it actually makes it easier. It's a stepping stone for the next organization you go to. But to your point, it can also help leave that impact, that positive legacy on the organization that you served as well. So that's amazing that you share that, Rickesh. It sounds like you made a great impact at Future Possibilities for Kids. So that being said, every organization has its challenges, and there's a lot of tough things that we face as leaders in the sector. What are one or two challenges that you've had to deal with in your role? And you could choose from any period of time. I'd love to know about a challenge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's just there's so many. There's probably two that really come to mind. One is, what is the cost of putting ourselves in the center of the work? And when I say in the center, I don't mean that we're centering ourselves, but diving in so deeply. And does that come at a cost if you don't have those personal boundaries about that balance? So I think there's one challenge on a personal level is, I think that I had a tendency to kind of probably give more of myself than I probably should have to maintain my own well-being, to be honest, especially in the last couple of years was particularly tough. So I think it's a thing for leaders to really think about, or anyone in an organization, is that we don't need to destroy ourselves in the process. And I'm not saying I did that exactly, but it's a challenge to say, I really care about this and I want to see this go further. I want to push for this because I care about it. And how do you say that? But the best way that I could do that is for me to also be in this for the long haul and the long game, and be whole and be replenished and be rested and be balanced. So that's the personal side. For organizational side, oh my gosh, there's just so many. I call myself lovingly critical of the social impact, nonprofit, charity sector, whatever you want to call it. Lovingly critical because I want to see it succeed. I believe it serves an important purpose. And also there's a lot of challenges. So how do you navigate things where a lot of the stuff is values based. So when things go against your values, and I'm impatient like that, like I want to get this stuff done right away. And then you get into the realities of what it's like to manage and lead an organization with an amazing team and a huge community supporting, obviously. But there's things you just want to do right now, and just for many reasons are not possible to do right away. So that impatience, but I think that fire, that urgency, that impatience needs to be in you because it motivates you. But I do think that sometimes things just don't happen as fast as I want. I want to see funders coming around and funding organizations properly for the things that we actually need. I want to see leaders and boards, getting out of the way of the wonderful people that work there. I want to see more consultation with communities that were being impacted and having them represented in decisions. So these are all the kinds of things that I'm like, we can keep doing better at those. So that's another piece of that impatience. It's sort of a personal and organizational challenge. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think that actually, I see that in the entrepreneurship world as well, where we want to solve problems, right? There's people that are driven for a solution, and clearly they see a better way, right? See a better way of doing things, and so it's hard to balance that. I think one of the ways to approach that is having small wins along the way, right, where you can kind of feel like you're making dents, and then still aiming for those big picture goals of transforming the sector, transforming how people work, which I love, and I love Rickesh, that you kind of are always an advocate for those bigger picture issues as well, and kind of keeping bringing those to the forefront, because it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of what we do. That being said, it is super important to celebrate our successes and showcase the impact. So I'd love to know, what are a couple of wins from your career so far that you'd love to be able to share?
Yeah, Daniel, and look, I mean, I know you. By the way, the challenges piece, I know you get it as someone who's founded an organization and dealt with a lot of this stuff, and is very involved in many ways in supporting this work. So I know you get it, and I appreciate that piece about celebrating success. If we're not looking back and celebrating, if we're not excited about the future and have hope, it's going to be very difficult to do some of this work, because some of it can be pretty heavy. You're dealing with some heavy things, right. So we do need to take some time, and I'm not very good at it necessarily, and I think a lot of us might not be. So I'm going to stretch myself a little bit and declare proudly a couple of successes. I mean, one of them is that at Future Possibilities for Kids, like over a course, it took a few years. I would say what we really were good at was what I'll call responsible growth. I mean, there was times where we were like pushing, like, okay, we're pushing quite hard, but we were like, we're not going to make these decisions if it's going to put us all out. We're not going to we're not going to do this growth on the backs of the employees of the organization. So I was very proud of that. But over time, we were able to more than double our programming reach. And so that was really wonderful that it was done in a way that was sustainable and over time, and everyone was on board with it. And we put into our strategic directions that the staff well-being is actually an indicator and measure of success. So that was something I'm proud of. And then on that same note, I was just really happy to see that even during a global pandemic, to be honest, that the team members at Future Possibilities for Kids, because for me, it's all about the team members and community members. Our employee engagement scores went up during that time, because we really focused on what can we do to support everyone in this time, and whether that's looking at paid time off and compensation and just flexibility and all those different pieces. And so in our last survey, everyone rated the organization a 5 out of 5 as recommending as a great place to work. And we had 0% turnover in almost 2 years. I was actually the first person to leave the organization. So, I mean, again, it's not to say it in an arrogant way. It's more to say, when the team is focused on this, when you focus on people, focus on your values, you can actually see those things play out when everyone's working together and aligned on those pieces. And you make those intentional changes, perhaps small wins over time, that lead to a better organization and people really being happy to be there.
That's amazing, and it is great. It's definitely a testament to your leadership, and I think it's a great example for the sector too. Is that you want your employees, you want your team, your volunteers, you want them to be ultimately your greatest ambassadors, right? And that's when we talk about communicating our impact and that growth, it really starts from the actual internal team. You don't want your marketing and communications messaging to actually, contradict what it's like on the inside. So I love that you shared those examples, and congrats on the success that you've had there for sure. When it comes to the online world, Rickesh, you're quite active on different social media platforms. I've seen you, experiment with TikTok. I've seen you do a lot of great written posts on LinkedIn. So I'd love to know, what platforms, if you want to share with everyone, what platforms are most important to you and most effective for you, and what you've seen work for your organization as well.
That's a good question around the platforms, because I think a lot of folks think you need to be everywhere. And I got some great advice before that if you're not reaching your audience, it's not helping you achieve your mission, like, why are you on this platform? I know we've come to a place where you sort of need to be on certain platforms for credibility at this point. So maybe some you can't avoid, but you still have to be posting regular, meaningful, interesting things. So I think they all serve a different purpose. I mean, Twitter obviously is going through some changes, but I found Twitter to be good for sort of those, sound bites and amplification. I found Twitter to be more personally kind of useful than necessarily organizationally. I think you have to put a lot of effort into it and like really be engaging folks and like tagging, let's say, political leaders or other organizations and retweet. Like you have to do a lot of work. It's not just putting stuff out there. You really have to, just like all of it, it's got to be collaborative. So Twitter is good for more kind of bite-sized advocacy, I would say. People aren't usually looking for kind of what's going on with your organization necessarily. Then I found LinkedIn, from a personal standpoint, is great for sort of finding other folks who are doing cool things, getting things out there from like let's say volunteer recruitment. LinkedIn is amazing for that. When our organization posted it or I posted about that, because people are kind of there for that purpose. It was also good for amplifying other messages. But I think it's the frame of mind people are in. It's like, this is a professional, networking space. And for me, you don't really separate personal and professional that much. And then, TikTok, I mean, I'm still figuring it all out. I don't know what I'm doing on there personally. I'm just trying to make people laugh and make fun of embarrass myself a little bit if it helps make other people laugh and have a little bit of validation about what they feel about working in this space, the good, bad, and the ugly. But I think there is opportunities for organizations to sort of use that. I mean, video is obviously really, really important. So I'm still trying to see if organizations, are using that. And not just, I've seen organizations on TikTok, for example, posting stuff that just feels very stuffy. It's like very, very text heavy. It's using buzzwords. And I'm like, I think people are going on TikTok because they want to just get something quick, 30-second entertainment or message or something. And so I think organizations that's one mistake I think people make is posting the same thing everywhere and just assuming it's going to work. And no, in fact, what's going to happen is the algorithm is going to push you out if you keep posting stuff that nobody's looking at. So post very meaningfully and really take the time to learn it. And if you don't have the resources, then better not to even be on there, I would say, than have a poor presence. So that's what's happening with TikTok. I'm not sure where I stand on Facebook, Instagram. I mean, they're always, again, kind of changing. I think Facebook's kind of really it's kind of on its way down in some ways, and for organizational purposes. I think Instagram probably has more of a opportunity to sort of share, especially again the visual and the video side of things. It just brings, I feel, some of the work and some of the people. It brings that to life in a different way. So I'm still trying to figure out what each one is for, but I know where I spend most of my time is probably Twitter and LinkedIn. And then if I have a few moments and an interesting idea, I throw a TikTok in every once in a while.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, it is great that you've obviously, over the years, you've experimented with different platforms yourself. And, it's important for someone as a leader, not just your social media coordinator to be the one that's aware, right? But to have, leaders in the space, whether they're executive directors or board members, actually, being active on these platforms and kind of seeing what it has to offer, because you may actually find that you have a great reception from partners, sponsors, volunteers for recruitment, as you just mentioned, on those platforms. So kudos to you for kind of always experimenting over all this time. I'd love to know whether, from your own experience, what are some of the best practices and principles that you've adopted? I don't know if you've done any kind of formal training when it comes to marketing, communications, and social, but you've had a lot of experience. So what are some of the things that you would like to share to nonprofits, charities, and leaders when it comes to marketing communications?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I know social media is not the only element of marketing. There's so many other pieces. It's not just advertising and that. But I think everything that I've done, I did it because I wanted to learn it better. I didn't expect to stay on there. I'm like, if we're going to ask our organization to use Twitter or LinkedIn, I really want to understand what it is and how it works. And then that's what's happened with every single platform. I learned it for organizational purposes so I could understand it myself, even if someone else was doing the work. And then I ended up staying on because I was having a good time and seeing the value of it for me personally. And honestly, just school of hard knocks, just like go in, try it, experiment, mess up, make mistakes, learn how these these proprietary algorithms work and see what kind of, I don't think the goal should be to get likes, you know what I mean? Or get followers. They talk about that. I mean, the people that are engaging with you with with your honest, authentic self and your messages, I think that's who you want to be engaging with you, even if it's not big numbers. And I think there's ways to take what you do and position it, package it in a way that does take advantage of, what is going to get more amplified without, selling your soul. I think I've seen folks do that, or whether it's organizations or people, and they just post stuff with the explicit goal of getting likes. And I think that's that's a problematic approach, because then you're maybe not coming from your true place. So I think that's a best practice, but I don't have any formal training. Even Facebook advertising, when I first started at FBK, I'm like, we need to really figure out how we can use this, especially for volunteer recruitment. So I learned Facebook advertising from scratch, and it was like, whoa, what a world, right? But once you learn it and you get it, I think that is an important piece, because a lot of times organizational leaders and board don't understand the technology, but they're still trying to make decisions about it, or they're writing it off and saying it isn't important. I think it has to be an organizational pillar. It has to be a strategy. It has to have its own investment. And sometimes for that to happen, you have to be kind of playing in there. That's what you said. You're a social media coordinator. So many people, Daniel, in my career have told me, just get a young gun, just get like a young person to come in and just like fire off this stuff and go viral. And I'm like, you clearly don't know what social media is, because that's not how it works. It's an engagement tool. You want multiple people. So how can you, for example, if you have board members, have them put on their LinkedIn profile that they're a board member with you, and then announce it to everybody. Raise passive awareness about your organization that doesn't feel like you're flaunting, right? You're just, hey, and it's not you as the org saying it. It's a board member who's proud to say, here's something that I'm doing. Get your volunteers to do that. Get donors to do that. This having other people amplify the message, I think, is key, because a lot of times the posts that actually come from the organization are not even what's getting the traction, right? It's other people sharing. That's what social media is all about. So be generous with sharing with others, amplifying other people's things. It's not email. It's not email marketing. You're not just sending stuff out. And I think that's important, is find other orgs doing great work. Amplify what they're doing. Don't be selfish. That if you're all out here for the same goal, the same cause, then share their work, even if it means that a funder or donor may give to them instead of you. That's okay, right? It's not competition. We're supposed to work together. So to me, that's, again, the best practice that I think a lot of folks miss, is how do you amplify other people and not just be saying, we're great, we're great, we're great, because over time that's just going to wear thin.
100%. I love that, Rickesh. You've given a lot of great, practical tips in there, but also, driving home that message that's core to building an online community, which is, you can't have an email newsletter with no subscribers. You can't have social media presence with no one following your page, right? So it really is about that community and about that interaction. And you also use the term amplify and amplification a lot, and that's part of this podcast, growth for good. It's literally about amplifying impact, right, for nonprofits and charities and social purpose organizations. So I think you've definitely kind of summed that up really well. That being said, I'd love to know how you've seen some of these marketing and communications tactics change over the course of the pandemic. You joined, your organization as ED, well before the pandemic. So that being said, have you seen kind of a shift, or did you witness that shift?
I think so. I think that the pandemic, in many ways, really just pushed us to look at things that we hadn't before. Like, how are we working within organizations? Because everyone need to be in the office all the time. Do we need to have everyone working 9 to 5? Do we need to have all these things in place? And I think the same thing was true for digital presence. And so organizations I've seen that really embraced it and resourced for that and said, wow, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff, probably online for the next while, but let's not just do it for the time being. Because I have seen a lot of folks kind of snapping back. No, take that, and that's where things are going. There's always a place for in-person and other streams, 100%, and build something that's going to continue to last in that space. So what I've seen is kind of 3 schools, I guess. One is people who just said, forget this, I'm still not embracing digital. 2 is the ones that embraced it and probably even saw results, and then kind of abandoned it. And then the 3rd is like the group that's like, we know this is how things are. There's going to be things coming up all the time, but this is something we have to invest in. And now is the time, because we are motivated to do so, because we need these channels in place, but also because there's more resources, funding, knowledge being shared. And it's an opportune time to say, let's build this up for the future. So I think that's kind of what I've seen, those 3 kind of streams. As for, the content or the platforms, I don't know if I've maybe observed any trends there, but I just have seen some distinct approaches as far as like who's doing what. And I was talking with someone the other day, the orgs that really embraced digital fundraising, virtual things, which is from an accessibility standpoint and reach standpoint, can really do well if they're done well, because nothing nothing worse than a bad virtual experience. I got to say, it's not for everybody, but when you have a bad one, it's really bad. You know what I mean? Like if you're in person, the food's bad, it's something like, you still some people there like, it's okay. It's an all right time. But I think that folks that did it well have seen it's paid dividends for sure.
Love that. And, we're all learning from that, and the best practices have continued to evolve. Right. And, there are some people that we know in our sector that have chosen to actually keep doing things online that shifted from in-person, because certain parts of that actually worked out better and they're more efficient, and maybe there's a better ROI on that. Right. So I think out of it, there's been a little bit of innovation, a little bit of things changing when it comes to some of their main programming and main fundraising efforts. I wanted to also ask about, just from a practical standpoint, right? You have run an organization, you have seen kind of marketing, fundraising budgets, things like that. In your opinion, are you seeing, are people spending, or organizations spending a lot of their resources on ads? Are they still allocating a lot to, print campaigns? I'd love to just get your perspective on how that looks.
When it comes to sort of budgeting, I mean, your budget reflects your priorities. So what you invest in, you can have it in your strategic plan and your vision and your goals or whatever. But if you're not investing in it, it's not really going to go anywhere. So, I mean, I think folks, again, there's schools of thought or schools of approach, that some folks really, they resourced up for their marketing, and they said, we're going to have to market differently. And they really planned ahead, and they're going to reap rewards for that for years to come. As far as, how things break down, I think, I mean, because this is not like my specialty area, but I've heard mixed things about like, you can't, I guess you can't have everything in one place, because all of a sudden Facebook decides they're going to change their algorithm, and they've done that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden your entire, base just disappears, because they're like, we have to make money in this way, and we're going to change this one setting or this one thing. And all of a sudden everything is just different. Or, Google advertising, where they were giving, they give away a lot of Google ads to nonprofits and charities. And then I know they made some changes that really impacted that, because they're like, wow, we want to prioritize the paying folks first. And so, things like that can happen. So I think it's just, don't really have everything in one place, but I think it's budget something. Like, start somewhere. I think a lot of folks, like, we don't have tens of thousands of dollars to invest in this. I don't think you have to start. I remember when FBK, I think I put, in the first year, I put $1,000 into Facebook advertising just to see what happens. And it was like pretty promising at that point. And this was many years ago. It's probably different now. And so I'm like, okay, well, now let's go for 5,000 and see what happens. And then lo and behold, we did proportionately better. So I don't know where folks are spending money, but I think that it's important to not have everything in one place. And as far as print goes, I mean, a lot of things are circular in nature, right? So there's been this big, understanding that everything's digital, paper is gone, and all this. And then imagine like a whole generation of folks who've like never received anything in the mail, right? And they get a thank you note from the organization, or they get a letter from the organization, or something like that, or even a direct mail appeal. There's this kind of saying that's not true. Direct mail is dead. And it's like, no, well, first of all, there's still tons of people who use it. And there's a whole generation of folks who I've sent things to people, and they're like, this is the first piece of personally addressed mail I've got in my entire life, other than a bill or like a credit card or something like that. And so I'm like, there's I think we just have to stay in touch with that, and things do kind of come full circle. So don't ever rule anything out forever, because it could come back. Yes. And then think about, the experience of what folks who are going to be your supporters, your donors, your community members in 10, 20 years, what's going to be, there, and start thinking about that and investing that if you can. Although I will say these days, it's hard to plan more than a couple of years out, to be honest. Like, I've seen so many people with like 1, 2, 3 year strategic plans versus like 3 to 5 year, which isn't maybe a bad thing, because the strategic plans should be, agile and all that. But this is an area where you can say, well, what might be happening in 10 years with the current base of folks that we want to be reaching, and how can we start to prepare for that?
Absolutely. And what you said, Rickesh, about experimenting, right? I think that's really important, because like you said, things change. So you may actually do an experiment now, do the same experiment 2 years later, and have completely different results. But it is really important to actually try that and learn internally, but also to look at some of the amazing resources that are out there. There's a lot of great, best practice guides, resources that are specifically for your sector or for fundraising. And of course, This ties into my next question about kind of, what's some of the sources of inspiration. I'm assuming, or I can predict, you're going to say that events are one of them. But I think attending these events, right, getting resources directly from practitioners, people who are actually, doing this, applying these marketing tactics, fundraising tactics within their organizations, and not just, writing a post about them theoretically. So that being said, Rickesh, what are some sources of inspiration that you've turned to either now or over the years?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I've been happy to see there's a lot more kind of intentional content coming out there for folks in the social impact space, different podcasts that are out there, different websites that are coming up, different affinity groups that are getting together. And that makes me happy because you have that sense of belonging. I also find that the kind of folks in the current landscape are more generous, I find, and open with sharing about, what you've learned and your mistakes you've made and things like that. And I think that's critical. People used to, I feel, a little bit more holding their cards closer to their chest. Maybe this is my impression, or maybe because we're just putting a lot more stuff out there. But I feel like people are being vulnerable and sharing what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. So I want to know the real. I don't want to, get into these things and not know. So when it comes to like what I listen to, it's not necessarily marketing communication focused, but for someone like yourself, for example, you're someone I've always appreciated the way that you ask very specific questions and get us thinking about how we put ourselves out there as someone who's in this unique space of being in the marketing space and having a foot in social impact, right? So you really get this. So you're someone who I've always appreciated that. But as far as podcasts, like I'm listening to a few different ones that are just talking about issues that we didn't really always talk openly about, such as The Ethical Rainmaker, which is like a podcast that talks about some really deep, social impact issues. So it's not a marketing podcast. And the stuff that we're talking about, I would love to see those things be discussed more in our marketing and communications, and being more real and more honest with donors, volunteers, supporters, and telling them what's really going on. We marketing, I understand there's positioning and language that's important, but I feel like we always try to present this certain image of ourselves to preserve our reputation. And I think we're missing out on that. And so I want to listen to things that are pushing the envelope and challenging the conversations that we have. And I hope that trickles into conversations we have with people and within the communities we work in and other folks, so that everyone has a better understanding of what it really takes to do social impact work. It ain't easy. So I think people need to know the goods and the bads, not just the goods, because then we feel like we have to kind of maintain this veneered, image of ourselves. And that's not real life.
So it comes down to, similar to your content, it comes down to finding sources that really share authentic stories, right? And being open about the experiences and accounts and learnings that are just part of the sector. I love that. Last question, Rickesh, before we wrap up, is I want to know what's one piece of advice that you would give to leaders in the sector today, knowing everything you've learned over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that everything I've learned over the years has been a result of hundreds of conversations with others. People have helped to shape me, influence me, and so none of us goes at this alone. I mean, my life motto is we're all responsible for each other's success. And so I think that comes down to every interaction that you have. And people reach out to me and ask for support and guidance, and I've done the same thing, and that people have been supporting me. I think the piece of advice I would give to leaders specifically is, when I say leaders, I mean oftentimes we say anyone in the organization can be a leader, right? And that's true. You can lead from wherever you are. I want to address those specifically to folks who are in decision making and influencing roles where not unfortunately, but where you're in a position to have power to make decisions and influence how your organization operates on a day-to-day basis, because a lot of folks don't necessarily have that in their purview of what they do. So if you're making decisions about budget, about hiring, about strategy, make sure that you're considering the impact on people and listening to people and having that influence what you do. Don't be in an ivory tower making decisions, punishing people who come forward with their truth and bringing issues up with management. You're in a position to really create an organization where everybody does feel like, wow, I'm being heard, and management does care, and that the leaders of the organization who are in a position to make those decisions are going to make the ones that are best for everybody, and not just ego and not just the organization's reputation, but for how you operate in every part of that atmosphere. So if you're a leader, don't underestimate the importance of that role. Listen to folks and be conscious of the power that you have and how you're going to share that and distribute it and use it respectfully.
And to use it for good, which is kind of why we're here. So I do appreciate, Rickesh, you taking the time to share that. I think you've definitely shared some really kind of powerful insights, not just from, marketing and communication side, but also just from leadership side and, how you can approach things authentically and really to amplify the good work that's happening out there. So where can people find out more about you, Rickesh, if they want to follow along?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Constant Changes. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I probably regret saying this, but you could look up Charity Dad on TikTok. That's my current handle. And then RadianceAdvisory.com is where I'm going to be really building. We can find out more about what I'm actually doing now. But yeah, just reach out if anyone wants to connect and chat and have a conversation. I'm always open for that. So it's kind of world right now where you could just literally Google my name and you'll find a way to reach me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Rickesh, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's a real honor to be here and chat with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Growth for Good. The show is presented by Daniel Does and produced by Creator Club in Toronto. You can find notes, links, and more about my guests at danieldoes.co, where you can also learn about ways we can collaborate. Feel free to connect with me anytime on LinkedIn or Twitter. If there is someone from the sector that you'd like to learn from or you'd like to be interviewed on the show, feel free to reach out to team@danieldoes.co. If you're considering creating a podcast or video series for your organization, connect with Creator Club at creatorclubstudios.com.